Shinsou did not remember agreeing to these terms and conditions by Evethewraith. Read by Distracted by Books. Summary. Shinsou's point of view of the sports festival during Conditions May Apply, Chapter 117. They really went all out, didn't they? Hitoshi muttered, mainly to himself, but the room's other occupant was within earshot. It wasn't that Hitoshi didn't want to be friends with Asui. She was more relatable than most of the class, more down to earth than the gaggle of energetic students Hitoshi has come to associate with. The only issue was that she seemed unapproachable. If there was one talent Hitoshi excelled in, it was finding any way possible to not approach an issue. That hardly mattered, since Asui replied without consulting him about it. "Glad I'm not fighting Todoroki, Gero," Asui remarked in that croaky voice of hers. She shivered in her chair as if she could feel all that ice they were working to clear up. She couldn't, as they were inside, watching the sports festival on the TV. The only reason he wasn't in the stands was because as soon as Asui saw Todoroki's match was next, she headed into an inside viewing room. After the whole Sero fiasco, she was more than eager to avoid his icy wrath. Hitoshi had followed because he could appreciate someone as spiritually inclined to warm weather as he was. And he didn't want her to sit alone during the most interesting part of the festival. The room they were in was bare, probably an office room or a storage closet, or maybe it was just an indoor viewing area as they were using it. A TV showed the events, but that didn't mean the room itself was for viewing. There's TVs all over the arena. The main reason he didn't believe it was a viewing room was that the only furniture was a whiteboard, 2 stacks of chairs, and a folding table. The duo had walked in, said good enough, and liberated 2 chairs from their position as king of the stacks. The room smelt like echoey paper, if that was a smell that could be described, that is. "Me too," he admitted begrudgingly. His legs were swinging on the chair, his heel pushing off the metal legs and swinging with the momentum. He had watched his old friend Midoriya level the icy landscape of the arena. Little, flighty, nervous Midoriya with enough power in his finger to beat Todoroki. Hitoshi wasn't as conspiratory as Todoroki. He had heard him mumble crazed theories about the boy, or as bitter as Bakugo, and boy does he want to know the story behind that. But even he could tell Midoriya could have beaten Todoroki instead of tying in explosive showmanship. The match could have been over quickly. Now Hitoshi didn't quite know how to feel about Midoriya. He was angry, confused, hurt, but he was also so concerned. Pretending to move countries was such an extreme reaction to finding out about his quirk. Hitoshi thought Midoriya would understand. He was small, skittish, and fit the bill of a person with a villain quirk. He didn't know whether to be angry like Bakugo or curious like Todoroki. The USJ did more than just scare him, it scarred him. Whenever he began to feel angry at Midoriya, the image of his bloodied, mangled body would flash in his brain like a warning. Seeing him blown backwards was like a reminder of it, like the after images of a dream you can't remember. The human ragdoll was fine. He got up a few moments later like it was just a cat pouncing on him. Unexpected, but not damaging. The only thing the incident did was make Hitoshi a little more jumpy and have a slight moral crisis over confronting Midoriya. Well, confronting him again. The last one didn't go to plan. He drummed his fingers on the cool metal of the chair. His only friend, Midoriya, didn't want to be around him. He had lied about moving countries just so he didn't have to hang out with him. Those were the facts of the situation. He has had a lot of time to sit and think on this, and from his intense thinking, there's one thing bugging him. Midoriya wasn't scared of Hitoshi's quirk. He had said that much. But Midoriya had also said that he was moving countries. Midoriya could lie, and was willing to prove it. It wasn't fair. He just wanted a friend, someone who wouldn't judge him. Then Midoriya ghosted him. And just to twist the knife in his gut, he left immediately after Hitoshi's quirk was revealed to him. It stung him bitterly, even now. But even through all the betrayal and anxiety Midoriya had so lovingly gifted him, he wanted him to win the festival. Bakugo was definitely not one to root for. He didn't mind Todoroki, but if Midoriya beats him in the upcoming tiebreaker, he and Asui can go sit on the stands. In a Bakugo versus Midoriya, there's no ice. As Hitoshi said earlier, he hated the cold. Asui and he had been discussing this. The best and most entertaining outcome would be those two in the finals. Plus, he really wanted to know the deal between Bakugo and Midoriya. Throughout all the training matches in school, Bakugo wasn't one to shy away from shouting. Maybe in the 1A section of the stands, if they get to the front, they might be able to hear something. Maybe. Bakugo's quirk is the only thing louder than him himself. Hitoshi would either get information, a headache, or a fun match to watch up close. During the Todoroki fights, they didn't really get a full viewing of the situation. Zoomed in highlights and far overviews, sure, but the angles were all weird, especially in Todoroki's winter jungle gym from earlier. After a long moment of thinking, Hitoshi spoke up. What do you think the tiebreaker will be? An arm wrestle wouldn't be fair, like with Kirishima and the metal Kirishima. Hitoshi flushed as he realized he had forgotten the 1B guy's name. Maybe like a race or something. Kero. She looked in his direction as she began to reply. And I'm pretty sure that guy's name was Tetsu. Hitoshi nodded, unable to find anything worth saying. He watched the adverts Yue played boredly. It'd have to be good to make up for all these ads, he mumbled. Now it was Asui's turn to nod at him with a non-committal hum to accompany it. The next few minutes stretched like a waking cat. By the time the TV switched from the endless haze of colorful ads, Hitoshi was absolutely sick of sitting there like a stuffed lemon. After about a second of footage of an empty arena, the camera zoomed in on Present Mike as he announced the rematch beginning. There's the faint noise of the crowds whooping and scrambling to their seats, getting ready for the penultimate match. The camera switched to Midnight as she started talking. After the monotony of the adverts, he was basically hanging onto her every word, probably as intended. As she fished handcuffs out, Hitoshi was left more confused than ever. He sent a glance at Asui. What? He mused verbally. Asui didn't reply, but it wasn't really a question, so Hitoshi didn't mind. The scene on the TV continued. Our contestants are going to be wearing these quirk-canceling cuffs for the fight, the woman rattled on, stretching the explanation out as far as possible. Her words left Hitoshi confused. Then it clicked. Quirk-canceling handcuffs. A quirkless fight. Sure, call him a little slow, but it was unexpected. It wasn't too strange Yue would do a do-over like this. Two of the most volatile quirks in the class, it'd be dangerous for another all-out brawl. But it wasn't the flashy showmanship he would expect from Yue. Asui nodded from beside him, directed more at Midnight. Fighting rivals were rushed on upon their hastily called names. As they adorned their new stylish arm cuffs and got into their positions, Hitoshi found himself curious. Two of 1A's best physical fighters without quirks, other than maybe Ojiro. If this was a show, they'd be the main characters. As the swooping camera drone zoomed in on Midoriya's face, it looked neutral to the untrained eye, but he knew Midoriya was nervous. He had seen how his face looked when he was nervous, and his composure had cracks. When he slipped into a fighting stance, something changed in his eyes. The tense worry on his face melted. The camera switched to Todoroki. His face had that indifference iconic to the icy boy's face. Hitoshi couldn't get a read on him, and he was good at finding those micro-expressions, growing up with an empath mother and all. As the buzzer finally went off, they both shot forwards instantly like a tensed rubber band. Surprisingly, Midoriya made the first move, a punch that was apparently caught. The camera kept spinning like in one of those new Pokemon games. 1 minute, he had a clear view, and the next, he got a screen full of Todoroki's backside. It was annoying, but in order to change the broadcaster, they'd have to find the remote to this TV, and Hitoshi didn't want a side quest where he would miss the fight just to change the channel for said fight. Watching the opponents fly across the screen was entertaining and all, but all he wanted were the results. Maybe a highlights reel. The tension was making his leg bounce with impatience. They both attacked hard and recovered faster. He missed a few punches, dodged or glanced. They seemed pretty evenly matched to Hitoshi. Hitoshi never claimed to be an expert. The fighting went on for a while. He kind of zoned out for a little while. Sure, it was intense, but he was bored, damn it. This chair hurt his sides, and the TV had no audio to draw him in. It was too late to go out to the surely more eventful stands now that he knew there'd be no ice. The fight would be over by the time he got there. Then, jarring him from his brain, the screen went still. Well, the incessant slow spinning didn't, but the fighting too did. Midoriya was holding Todoroki to the ground. He wrangled around for a moment, then two, then a few more seconds. The match was called in Midoriya's favor. He smiled. So did Asui, apparently, who he'd forgotten was there until she spoke. I didn't think he'd win. Huh? I thought you said you wanted him to, he questioned, turning to face her. Yeah, but I didn't think he'd actually do it, Gero. She responded, explaining. Oh, right, he responded. Hitoshi knew he'd win. I mean, he wasn't sure, but he assumed he could. Seeing Midoriya fight when they were kids, it was similar to this. He never used his quirk then, but he was able to manhandle Hitoshi then, even if Hitoshi wasn't really the definition of a good fighter whatsoever. Even if he didn't know how to fight then and beating up a small kid of Hitoshi's level wasn't too big of a feat, but he guesses how impressive it seemed back then stuck. Gosh, he didn't want to think about those days in the garden. It made him feel sick to think of how easily that friendship was cut off. He didn't get it. He would never get it. He watched as Midoriya stood, offering a hand to Todoroki. He doesn't bother watching them leave. He just turns to Asui. We can go back to the stands now. I guess there won't be any more ice to worry about. He did a half laugh, not to be rude to Todoroki or anything, just so it doesn't seem like Asui trapped him down here just to sit with her. Oh, yeah, Gero, she croaks. The spinning of the camera is kind of disorienting. She then stands, picking up her chair and crowning it Supreme Emperor once more of the chair stack. He had forgotten they had stolen the chairs. Hitoshi grabbed his chair, plopping it onto its own stack. He walked over to the closing door, Asui having left, and bumped the door open behind her. He slipped through it before it shut. He speed-walked to walk at the girl's side. They walked through the maze of rooms for several minutes in silence. The white walls looked the same, guided only by signs and memory of where they had come from. Then they saw Endeavor, blocking the way. Or, well, a backside they could assume would to be pro-hero Endeavor. They both paused, unsure what to do. Then the hero spoke. Third place? Third? Everything I do for you, Shoto. And the man continued his lecture, his tone barely concealing his rage. They could only assume he was rattling off to a hidden Shoto Todoroki, obscured by his figure. Hitoshi froze. He didn't know what to do. He stepped to the side, locking eyes with an uncomfortable Todoroki. The cold kid looked resigned to his verbal beating. Even without context, some of the comments rubbed him the wrong way. He glanced at Asui in a silent question. She nodded. Then his gaze fell on the flaming hero before them. Hitoshi then spoke up. "Excuse me, Endeavor." The hero paused. He turned around, seeing them. When he knew he had both of their attention, he continued, "Aizawa told me to collect Todoroki." He stated carefully to keep his tone even and face perfectly neutral. Todoroki raised an eyebrow. Hitoshi tried to silently convey that it was a ploy. Endeavor looked at Hitoshi's face. He then glanced at his son's face. Then he nodded. "Shoto, don't disappoint your teacher as much as you disappointed me." With that scathing comment and a pat on the back more harsh than comforting, he left. Hitoshi waited until he was several meters away and approached Todoroki. The dual-colored boy spoke, his eyes glancing over Hitoshi in particular. "What does Aizawa need?" Hitoshi mentally face-palmed. Todoroki was as dense as a brick. "Nothing. You just seemed uncomfortable. I lied to Endeavor." He spelled it out to Todoroki. The boy nodded and a second of silence passed. "You didn't have to." He finally spoke up. Hitoshi thought he almost sounded grateful. The cracks in his neutral expression were smoothing over. He couldn't really tell either way. Hitoshi didn't know what else to say, but Asui, the angel, piped up. "Do you want to watch the final with us, Kero?" she asked, doing that cheek poke she always seemed to do. Hitoshi almost banged his head against the wall. Insensitive. He just lost and would surely be upset at the mention of the finals, especially with how hard his dad was scolding him. Instead, Todoroki smiled. "Yes, we should go before we miss it." They both began to walk. All Hitoshi could think was that he just witnessed two undiagnosed spectrum kids become friends. Not wanting to be left behind, he followed, walking beside Asui. They made their way towards the stadium exit, sitting together in the stands silently, waiting for the final round. They had managed to secure some seats closest to the action. End of story.